The Democratic whip is recognized.
Are we in a quorum call?
Yes, we are.
I ask consent that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, pending before the United States Senate on this Saturday morning is the nomination of Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota to be the Secretary of Homeland Security in the cabinet of President Trump. I have never met Governor Noem. I'd hoped that we would have a chance to get together, but that didn't work out. I made a request for a courtesy meeting, but we couldn't schedule it, so my vote is not contingent on a person showing up in my office, but I wish we'd had a chance to meet and talk about the awesome responsibility she is seeking with this department. Department of Homeland Security is virtually the creation of 9/11. That's when the term Homeland started being used at our highest levels of our government in an effort to keep America safe from 9/11 or anything like it happening in the future. Over the years, it has accepted major responsibility when it comes to the issue of immigration, particularly when it comes to making certain that our border processes are orderly and reach our national goals, serve our national goals and values. It is interesting to reflect on where we are on the issue of immigration. Starting point is we are a nation of immigrants, period, end of quote. I'm the son of an immigrant mother who came to the United States at the age of 2. I have been fortunate enough to be entrusted by my state to represent them here in first the House and now the Senate. I'm honored for that with that responsibility. If you visit my office here in the Capitol, you will see behind my desk my mother's naturalization certificate. Very proud of it. Before she passed away, I asked her if she still had it, and though she was in kind of a compromised health position, she jumped out of her chair, was gone 2 or 3 minutes at most, and came in with a battered old brown envelope. And I opened it, and there was her naturalization certificate, which I display behind my desk. I might also say, parenthetically, that a little slip of paper came out of that same envelope. I picked it up, and it was a tiny little piece of paper that said the filing fee of $2.50 had been paid. It was stamped official. And I said to Mom, "Why did you keep this?" She said, "If the government ever challenged me, I could prove that I paid my filing fee of $2.50. That was my mom, an immigrant lady who worked harder her whole life, 8th grade education, raised 3 boys, and I think we have tried our best to confirm her confidence in us and do our best to serve this country in various ways. So immigration is personal to me. I'm proud of my immigrant roots. On my father's side, the opposite is true. The family dates back to before the Revolutionary War, but that is not unusual in America. We are a gathering of families with many different backgrounds, but immigration is a central part of who we are as Americans. And the question, of course, before us is, what are we going to do about problems in immigration that faces? I can tell you that the problems predated Joe Biden, predated my arrival in Congress, and go back many other years. If you look at the history of immigration in this country, it is a mixed review. There are times when we embraced immigrants to build transnational railroad lines and the like, and there are times when we shunned them and said they were not welcome in this country. It moves back and forth. We are now at a period, everyone knows, where immigration at our borders is a central issue, raised in the last presidential campaign and certainly on the minds of many voters. I was fortunate enough a few years ago, 2013, to join what was known as a Gang of 8, 4 Democrats, 4 Republican senators who sat down and said, let's write a comprehensive immigration reform bill. And we did. In that group was Senator John McCain of Arizona, Lindsey Graham, Senator Flake, and Senator Rubio, our new Secretary of State. On the Democratic side, myself, Senator Schumer, Senator Menendez, and Senator from various states that joined. Senator Feinstein was one of them who worked toward reaching a goal. We brought a bill to the floor, a comprehensive bill, I think a good one. It passed with over 60 votes. Unfortunately, after it was sent to the House of Representatives, it died without it even being debated. We missed an opportunity there. And it tried to address some fundamentals, which I believe should be part of any immigration system in America. I can tell you what my fundamental values are. I've certainly identified myself as embracing immigration, but when it comes to the process of immigration, there are certain things that I think are absolutely essential. I think most senators of both political parties would agree, though some would have variations on this theme. Central to immigration reform, as far as I'm concerned, is an orderly process at the border, which means that, except in rare circumstances, people will come through that border gate in an orderly fashion to be reviewed and carefully scrutinized before they go a step further as to their presence. Secondly, I accept the premise, and think every American probably joins in it, in saying we never knowingly want to allow a dangerous person to come in this country, period, end of quote. And secondly, if an immigrant to this country is involved in dangerous conduct to the rest of the people who live in this country, we don't want them. They can go back to where they came from or some other place, but they can't stay here in the United States. And the third reality is one that is tough, because it's easy to say and hard to live with, and that is we cannot accept everyone who wants to come into America tomorrow. It just has to be done in a thoughtful, orderly way that is in the best interest of our nation and the people who live here first. We've got to, for example, allow people to come to this country if they bring skills that are necessary for our future, but we have to offer opportunities to people who are already in this country, citizens and those legally in America, for an economic opportunity in the future. They're our highest priority and should be. Having said that, the Department of Homeland Security, which Governor Noem is seeking to lead, is now embarking on a new era, the new Trump 47 era, where mass deportation is the catchphrase of the day. Let me give you an illustration of what mass deportation could mean. We don't know for sure how it will be implemented, but I'm very concerned. We had a hearing this week with President Trump's Agriculture Secretary, Ms. Rollins from the state of Texas. And I asked her a question, which I think raises a valid concern about mass deportation. Currently, we know that we need immigrants and migrant labor as a critical part of agriculture. When the Illinois Farm Bureau comes to meet with me, they frequently raise the issue of immigration. In what way? Well, for example, a member of the Farm Bureau has a dairy operation in northwestern Illinois. She said to me that it was the third generation of her family with that dairy operation. If you know anything about dairy operations, they are labor intensive. Those cows have to be milked twice a day, and you better be ready to do it, and do it with frequency if you want to continue a successful dairy operation. It involves a lot of manpower, and it used to be that there was a time when dairy families in my state and others had a bunch of kids, because the kids were all ultimately going to be part of the family operation. Those kids are not sticking around on dairy farms as much as they used to. And so those who want to keep the dairy farms in operation need workers. It is almost virtually impossible to find American workers on these dairy operations because it's such tough work. And so migrant labor becomes a critical part of the operations in dairy. I can recall this lady said to me, if I can't get migrant laborers to work on my dairy farm in northwestern Illinois, this is the end of it, Senator. We can't continue. I don't have enough family members, and certainly there are not kids or anyone, workers in town, who are anxious to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and start milking cows. That's part of my lifestyle. Similarly, a lady from the Illinois Farm Bureau said, well, now that we're on the subject, I have an orchard in southern Illinois. We grow peaches and apples. And I will tell you that I've given up the thought of hiring any local young people to work in my orchard operation. They just won't do it. She said, I've got a fruit stand out by the highway. I've enclosed it, I've air conditioned it. I still can't get young people to man the cash registers and sell the apples and peaches on the side of the road. They just don't like doing it. And so I rely every year on migrant labor to come and pick the crop and even to work in the fruit stand out by the highway. That's a reality. And she says, I'm done if I can't get migrant workers. So let's put that in the context of mass deportation. We estimate that 40% of ag workers today are undocumented. That means that literally they're working in most cases, many cases I should say, without legal authority. They come with regularity from Mexico usually, or other countries nearby, to work in the fields and go back home at a certain point. They are illegal while they are here, but they're doing valuable work. They're paid for it. It's backbreaking work, things that people just ordinarily don't want to do. Now let's put that in the context of mass deportation. If the Trump administration decides to use the Department of Homeland Security, which Governor Noem is seeking to head, to enforce mass deportation, what's going to happen in that orchard? What's going to happen on that dairy farm? What's going to happen in so many agricultural pursuits where migrant labor, undocumented labor, is critical to the operation? Well, I can tell you in many instances they will be removing the very workers that pick the crop. And so what does that mean to Mr. and Mrs. America? Wait till you go to the grocery store in the produce section and look at the selection you have today and mark it in your mind because it may not be there tomorrow. If the people who pick the crop, who grow the crop, who man and provide resources for the dairy operations are gone, many of these farm operations will be gone with them. So I asked Ms. Rollins, who's seeking to be Secretary of Agriculture, are you going to warn the people in agriculture states like Illinois and Texas that mass deportation is a threat to their workforce? And she said, of course, she wouldn't answer that directly. I wasn't surprised by that. But it's an indication of the complication of mass deportation. Take what I've just said and apply it to so many other industries. The hospitality industry, good indication. How many people are cleaning those hotel rooms that you stayed in last night who are undocumented? A lot. And in another area that I think is really critical is when it comes to caregivers. When you leave your child or grandchild at the daycare center in the morning and head off to work or whatever your assignment may be for the day, you entrust the most precious part of your life, that little child or grandchild, in many instances to an undocumented worker. They don't get paid as much as most, and they have an awesome responsibility, and I think every grandparent and parent would agree. You want to make sure that they're good and talented and qualified and show up to work. The same is true when it comes to caregivers for those senior citizens. Your mother, your grandmother went down to breakfast this morning at the care facility and luckily had by her side one of the workers and caregivers who escorted her carefully back to her room. We all know that at a certain age, a fall can be literally deadly and cost a person's life. So you count on that worker. Now if you go into mass deportation and start removing the undocumented workers from child care facilities and senior facilities and nursing home facilities, how many people will be prejudiced and hurt by that? I'm afraid very many. So this notion of cleaning the ranks and ridding ourselves of undocumented people in this country, we have to give some thought to. If they are dangerous, if they've committed a crime, no questions asked. They have to go. And it has to be a serious crime and not just an arrest for shoplifting, for example. I personally believe they should not only be charged with the crime, but prosecuted. But if that happens, they're gone, period. And I think most people would agree with that. So Governor Noem's aspiration to head this agency comes at a critical moment in history. The economy of this country is about to change with mass deportation. We estimate there are about 11 million, roughly 11 million people in this country undocumented, meaning that they are here not in legal status. How did they get here? In a variety of ways. They overstayed visas in most instances. Some of them came across the border, that's for sure, but many of them came into this country as students or tourists and stayed. And they comprise the largest share of the 11 million undocumented people in this country. I think we dealt with this issue in a responsible way in the bipartisan comprehensive bill. Here is what we said, and I want to make it clear. I think this is a thoughtful and sensible way to approach it on a bipartisan basis. If you are undocumented in this country, under our bill, you are required legally to step forward, identify yourself, pay a fee to remain in this country. You would then be registered by the government. We would know who you are, where you are. You would pay your taxes while you're working and make your contributions to Social Security and other funds. And you would be, it would be enforced by something called E-Verify, where every employer in this country would be required to check and make sure that the person who is working and undocumented was in fact registered with the government. That to me is a thoughtful way to make sure that we are safe, still have the workers that we need, and to say that those that are here on undocumented status, you may stay. We're not guaranteeing your citizenship, although I personally believe that they should be given a path to citizenship, but it is a starting point and a sensible one. We would say to those workers at the dairy farm in northwestern Illinois, keep working, but now you're going to have your own Social Security number and your own requirement for paying taxes on a personal basis, as an example. So it's a little bit different than what President Trump has envisioned. His sounds a lot different in many respects, but it's an indication of the awesome responsibility that Governor Noem will have if she becomes the Secretary of Homeland Security. Our border must be secure, and we certainly, as I said earlier, must deport any dangerous individuals who are here illegally. The approach that I've heard will remain to be seen what happens by President Trump and his DHS Secretary nominee, Kristi Noem, is not just targeted at criminals. It is aimed at legal immigrants and immigrant families who've lived in our country, many of them for decades, and are pillars of our community. Without fail, I can predict what's going to happen if President Trump pursues his approach. In community after community in Tennessee and in Illinois, we will discover undocumented people to our surprise. I didn't know that that man running the restaurant in southern Illinois from Mexico, the popular restaurant that people love to go to on Friday and Saturday nights, I didn't know he was undocumented. I can't believe they are going to deport him. We're going to hear stories like that over and over again of people that we sit next to at church, count on every day in our business dealings, see at the nursing homes, see at the daycare facilities, who will be subject to deportation. And not just those who are undocumented, but many times it appears to be that they're going to say to their children who were born in the United States and are legal citizens under the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, they have to leave as well. There is no basis for that to happen in law or in the Constitution, and yet I'm afraid that might be the future. We've already seen President Trump suspend refugee admissions program, which provides safe haven for those fleeing oppressive regimes around the world, including people from Afghanistan who literally risked their lives to help American soldiers survive in that wartime context. Some of those people are being threatened now with exclusion and deportation. Many refugee applicants wait decades to come to the United States lawfully, and all of them go through rigorous vetting. I'm talking about not months, but years of background checks before they can be considered as a refugee in this country. When they've waited so long under difficult circumstances, that seems fundamentally unfair. The Trump administration has already canceled flights for over 1,600 Afghan refugees scheduled to come here, including the families of active duty U.S. military personnel and those who are at risk because they fought for the U.S. On the side of the U.S. in Afghanistan. I have a particular situation in Chicago, which I'm honored to represent. We have a section of that city, one of my favorites, it's known as Ukrainian Village. It goes without saying that that means so many people from Ukraine have family and relatives in the Chicagoland area. Great restaurants and bakeries and churches, schools. It's a vibrant part of the city of Chicago. This is something most people don't know. When the governor of Texas decided to send thousands of undocumented people to the city of Chicago, It caused a lot of upheaval and change overnight, and many of those people had to be helped by units of government, the state of Illinois, the city of Chicago, and others. At the same time, those 50,000 people were being slowly integrated into the local economy. And most of them now don't live in any government-sponsored facility, but they have their own lives, and they're working at this point. At the same time that happened, another 50,000 came into Chicago from Ukraine. Because of the war in that country and the displacement of people in that war, we were offered an opportunity under the Biden administration for those Ukrainians to come to the United States under two conditions. First, they have a sponsoring family, and second, they have a job waiting for them. They won't be dependent on government programs for their survival. We did that, and almost no one noticed. These Ukrainians had become part of the community in the Chicago greater region and have been part of the economy. And they've been accepted and embraced. Now they face the real prospect of mass deportation as well. Where are we going to send them? Where are they going? This war in Ukraine makes it virtually impossible for them to return to what was their home. So I hope that as we reflect on mass deportation, we realize there are complicating factors in many of these circumstances. Stopping the flights to America will not make life any easier for those who applied for refugee status, and it sends a message in Afghanistan to our allies and troops around the world that we will not stand by and support and be friends with those who risk their lives for our soldiers. The President Trump has announced his plan to attempt to deny citizenship to children born in the United States if their parents are not citizens or lawful permanent residents. I don't know if I have a copy at my desk here. I'm supposed to have. Oh, here it is. I'd like to read to you, Mr. President, the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. I hope everyone gets a chance to take a look at it themselves on this whole question of whether someone can be born in the United States and become a citizen. That has been the law in this country for over 140 years, and it really is a provision of the Constitution which is explicit. Here's what the 14th Amendment says, and I quote it directly. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. That is the first sentence of the 14th Amendment. So when President Trump says that he is opposed to birthright citizenship and challenges it, it was no wonder that the court issued an injunction or a temporary restraining order and stopped him immediately, saying this was a judge who was appointed by Ronald Reagan, that the Constitution is explicit. We've got to make sure that our policy when it comes to immigration is consistent with our Constitution and consistent with our values. And for many years in this country, over 100 now, that has been very clear that birthright citizenship is guaranteed by the Constitution. Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, has said she wants to end birthright citizenship. She's described the southern border as a war zone and called unauthorized immigration a, quote, invasion, unquote. Governor Noem was the first governor to deploy National Guard to the southern border and sent them a total of 8 times during her tenure. I was disappointed she refused my request to meet, as I wanted to ask her a few questions about those decisions. As I said before, we need a secure border. That's why I worked for years to pass bipartisan legislation. But we also need to protect millions of non-citizens whom Americans rely on each and every day. Immigrants make up 40% of our agriculture workers and 40% of our home health aides. They are an outsized percentage of child care workforce and the farm workforce in America. If they are gone, the cost of daycare for families is going to go up because there'll be fewer workers. Immigrants have been a key part of the American success story. Our nation, I believe, needs them more than ever in a thoughtful way. Remember the 3 elements that I stand for, and I hope most people agree. 1, we need an orderly process at the border. Number 2, no dangerous person should ever be allowed knowingly into this country or allowed to stay if they are seeking permanent immigrant status. And number 3, we cannot accept every person in the world who wants to come to America tomorrow. It has to be a thoughtful, orderly process consistent with our values and consistent with our obligation to American families. They do not deserve, those who are here, to live in fear each day. Any real solution to immigration challenges must give them stability and a future that they can count on. Americans deserve a real fix to our broken immigration system that protects American workers and treats immigrants fairly. This pending nomination is a critical one. It may be the hottest topic in Washington today. I look forward to the opportunity to meet Governor Noem at some point to hear more about her intentions. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.